we're going to move on to the minute approval of the September minutes that I emailed to you, and they're also in the packets of those that are in the room. And if I could get a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, Crystal, and a second.
I'll second.
Eric?
Oh, wait, no, I can't second. I wasn't
You weren't here.
Sorry.
Yeah,
you weren't here.
I withdraw
That's
my
right.
second.
You have to, yeah.
We're having a, okay, I'll say.
Okay, all right, John. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I take it there's no opposed. One thing I do want to mention before we move on to our presentation this morning, I did not put it on the agenda, and I should have, is the Engroff Ostermeyer Legacy Award. We still have the month of October, so if you'd like to nominate anyone, there is the nomination form that has been sent to you. Nominations are due by the 31st of October, so I just wanted to reiterate that for this month. Now, as Thomas said, we have a presentation that is a first of its kind here in Vermont, or at least in northern Vermont. So the conversation or the presentation today is on the Civilian Conservation Corps of Northwest Vermont. And once again, giving us this presentation are Thomas Hark and Bridget Higdon. And the floor and screen are yours.
Okay. So, as I said earlier, my name is Bridget. Most of you know me from the Messenger, but today I'm taking off that hat and putting on my volunteer board chair hat. So, yes, I'm the chair of the leadership team, which is made up of volunteers here in Franklin and Grand-Isle for the Civilian Conservation Corps of Northwest Vermont. I got involved over a year ago now when I first met Thomas. We met for coffee because he had this idea and said that he had some money to demonstrate a national Civilian Conservation Corps program, and he wanted to start out here in St. Albans and was curious about whether, wanted to know about the community a little bit more and whether this would be a good fit. And so we talked about it, and I said, yeah, I think it would be really great here. And so that's how we sort of got started, and we sort of assembled some other team members who I'll introduce as we go along here. But basically our mission is to create stronger, healthier, and more sustainable communities by teaching young people the values of personal and civic responsibility. And that would be done through a traditional Conservation Corps program. There are, so as I said, year-round Conservation Corps program, which for people who don't know is small teams working with trained leaders to complete projects in Franklin and Grand-Isle counties. And I'll explain some of those projects in just a minute. But we know that there's about 6,500 youth between the ages of 15 and 24 between the two counties. And so what if we were able to mobilize all of those youth to sort of help combat climate change while also learning some personal values and things like that. What got me really excited about this project in the beginning was as when I was a young person and you heard all of this stuff on the news about climate change and how, disruptive it might be, it's hard, you feel really helpless. What can I do to participate or make any sort of impact or change? And so what was exciting to me about this was the chance to be able to give youth a way to help and contribute to this sort of problem. And also I'm a skier and a cyclist, and I enjoy our natural areas and want them to be around for years to come. I didn't grow up in Vermont, but I live here now, and I want to, I'm invested in sort of keeping it as beautiful as it is. So some of those projects that those youth crews might be able to put together are hyperlocal trail building, historic preservation and restoration, land conservation, waste reduction, water quality projects, pedestrian infrastructure, and community education. We've taken this presentation now to several other groups. We went up to the Missisquoi Bay Partners a couple of months ago, and that's folks who are working on the river basin up there, the Missisquoi Wildlife Refuge, and a lot of those groups say, we need help. We have small staffs. We can't plant as many trees as we want to. We can't check on these locations as often as we would like to. And so if we were able to bring youth up there and teach them these skills and get them excited about these kinds of jobs, that would be really, really amazing for our community. And we know that there's a lot of work going on with trails in St. Albans and beyond right now, between the rail trails, between the mountain bike club things in the town forest. There's a lot of farms who are transitioning sort of to agro-tourism. You've got the Schwanier family farm up in Highgate who are, building trails to sort of grow their, what they can contribute to the economy. And so I think there's a lot of ways for youth to get involved in those projects here specifically. So we've assembled this really great team of all female leaders, which is kind of happened by chance, but it's been really exciting because there's not a lot of women in the conservation space. So there's myself, Jen Yandow from Green Mountain Power is our vice chair. Stephanie Hodgman is a guidance counselor at BFA St. Albans. Leanne Wright is the director of the Northwest Career and Technical Center. That's been a really wonderful partnership because we think especially that youth in tech programs can get involved in this type of work. And then Penny Collins from Green Mountain Power as well. We've been meeting for the last year or so, and this team has fluctuated a little bit as people are able to give time and not. And so we've had other people involved in the past, but this is our solid crew at the moment, which has been really exciting. And so how to get involved is that you can like us on Facebook, you can subscribe to our newsletter, you can look for future opportunities to volunteer, and we've also got a website now. So this is still in sort of the planning stages. As you can probably tell, there is no active crews working at the moment. This is something that we want to get off the ground. And so for the last year, we've done a lot of different work, mostly spreading awareness, but we're at the point now where we're looking to start building some of these crews and are excited to get that off the ground. So Thomas here can probably tell you a little bit about himself, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I thought that was well done, Bridget. Thank you. And the only small correction I would make was that meeting Bridget was quite by accident. I had read someone said, you should read this article about the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps organization that I was instrumental in launching years ago. And I read this article and I was blown away about how well it was. And I just had to call her and say, thank you. I never read such a good article. And that led to coffee, and then that led to St. Albans. And I was thinking this could be the perfect place to demonstrate a national model that we think could be picked up by many, many communities. My story is really simple. I had a job years ago with the Federal Youth Conservation Corps when I was a junior in college. It changed my life and set me on a course to wanting to figure out how do we, when the federal program went away, to figure out how could these things survive in the private sector. If they were really as good as we thought they were, there should be a way. And so I was just a dumb early 20-year-old kid who didn't know what I didn't know, and I got hired in Vermont, who had Madeline Keenan and Howard Dean had appropriated $1 for the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps. And with my backpack and 10-speed bike and little Macintosh computer, we were off and running. And the real, the core model does a lot of things. It's at its core, at its core, it's a really simple model. Small, diverse teams working under really mature, good, authentic adults to complete important work just important work. Often that's conservation work. And often people get drawn in. Certainly young people, in the VYCC, we'd have 18 applications for every young person or every position that we had available. The work really draws people in. They get paid for it. There's very high expectations. They wear a uniform. They command a lot of respect because of what they produce and how they operate itself in the community. And but we are not a conservation organization per se. What really, to go back to the original thing that Bridget said, is that what we think is absolutely vital is for really every individual in the community, but our focus is young people, is to build a core set of values that they can use for the rest of their lives, that will help them just be a better person, have better families, better employees, and better citizens. And perhaps some of them become leaders in their communities. We think they will. We call it everyday leadership is ultimately what we're after. This idea is that, none of us are going to solve the really big issues, but every day in our lives we make literally hundreds, if not thousands, of little decisions in terms of what we do and things that we say. And what we really believe at our core, C-O-R-E, is this idea that if each of us could truly be responsible just for what comes out of our mouth and our own actions, we could really change the world if enough people, not that we have to be perfect, but if we could literally just be responsible for what comes out of our mouth and our own actions. So how does this translate for a young person? Did they, we're all very different. We have, different color skin, different amounts of wealth, different types of schools. I mean, there's so many differences in all of our lives, right? The question is, are we doing everything we could do? So as a young person, did they show up to class? Did they do their homework? Did they do all the things that they should do? That or at in the work setting at the core, it comes down to really basic stuff. You're responsible for a set of tools. You're responsible for how you communicate within that small, group of young people. The story that I really love to tell, because I think for me it encapsulates the whole thing. A young woman came into my office, and she was from Harwood, near Waterbury, and dressed completely in black, more jewelry piercings than one I could imagine anyone having. She had just got out of a core experience, and she had a bone to pick with me as the head of the VYCC, because she said, I was told that I was going to be on a crew with 8 people from 8 different communities, and I ended up being on a crew with another woman who was a young woman from the same school who was apparently the head cheerleader. And it was really traumatic because they literally got in fights at school, apparently. And somehow, I don't know how the crew leaders did it, they probably picked straws of who's going to sleep together in the tents and whatnot. They ended up in the same tent. They were in this intense VYCC experience that went for a month. And I had to agree with her. She was right. We had said there'd be 8 young people from 8 different communities. And in this case, it didn't happen to work out that way. But at the end of the story, what she told me was, she made a point to say, we're still not friends, but they sit down and have lunch once a week together. Oh. And if our world, think what just happened in DC last night, right? If our world, no matter how different we all are, if we could just realize that we maybe have more in common than we don't, and that we could sit down and have lunch with each other no matter how different we look, how different our backgrounds, how different everything is, it would really truly be a different world. And so our goal in demonstrating this model is, currently there's about 100 cores around the country. It's taken 30 years to get to that point, and there's about 20,000 young people nationwide. The challenge for that was put out to me and the CCC was to say, we believe if we're going to create a healthier community, a healthier, stronger, more civil society, right? It starts with individuals really, truly being responsible for what they say and do. It's about being self-reliant, so when something happens to us, we get back up and we keep going. It is about education. Our democracy depends on a basic level of education. And we also think, our country was founded as we all chip in and do what we can for the community. And so this idea of service, personal responsibility, self-reliance, education, service. These are the values that we think are the outcomes. If we do this job right, that young people will walk away with their ideas that will, because of the intensity of the experience, sort of get embedded, and they just become a part of who they are, and will really impact and change their lives, for the rest of their lives, perhaps their families too. That's really what we're all about. The model is they're going to do a ton of conservation work. They're going to be involved in issues of our day like climate. I have 3 kids that are in their early 20s, and as often as not, they're overwhelmed like, what could one person possibly do? And there's a lot one person can do. I think all you have to do is look around the table and everyone is part of this, and you see each of us can do something. And we don't know what's going to happen in 10 years or 20 years, but what are we doing this hour, this day, this week that might make the world just a little bit better place? And it comes down to that day of personal responsibility, what we say and what we do, and working towards that better world. The model that we put together the thought was, instead of a big federal program that depended on lots of public dollars or philanthropic dollars, we had to go out and raise all this money, because if you're going to pay young people a wage and all the rest, it costs. How would you do this? And that was the question that was put in front of us, or put in front of me. And what we came up with was this idea of, we looked at the reuse industry, which is a rapidly growing, and it has been for the last 10 years, thrift. And we discovered that if a thrift store is run well professionally, there's about a 25% profit that can be made on those goods. And so what if a group of young people were responsible for running a thrift store, which would be a year-round model for them to participate in, and then the profits from that store, they were responsible for how those get spent in their own community, in terms of funding the more traditional outdoor conservation crew projects. It could really, and thus you could have a board of non-traditional people. You could be a board of young people, as far as that goes, and the whole thing would be self-funded. So in what we've spent the last year, or maybe more, almost a year and a half.
Months, yeah.
Is that we thought, when we did our research, we looked around at many communities around Vermont, and there's a lot of open retail space everywhere. Highgate Center is a 225,000 square foot space, has 150,000 square feet that have been unused for the last 10 or more years. Abishan's just closed down. There's all these spaces downtown the city, and we thought this should work. What we haven't been able to do is actually land a retail space. The guy that owns Highgate says, I've owned it for 40 years, I'm making gobs of money, and I'm just going to wait until I get the highest amount possible. Abishan's was a different story. I won't get into the details of that, but it's a different story. Happy to on an individual basis, but it's a different story. And so we've really struggled to figure out how to pull off that model. And I think if we had deeper pockets and more funding, we could do that, because we would then be able to take a bigger risk in terms of paying a higher amount. We're really confident in this model, but we've learned a lot in the last year. It's been enormously frustrating, for all of us, because we never in 100 years we never dawned on us that we would have this be the one thing that we'd struggle with. So now we're at a moment where we're saying, well, let's, what if we just turn this around? Instead of trying to create a store that raises money that funds the project, what if we took the money that's available to us and we just started a small on-the-ground project with a handful of young people, and we got that moving, and then we continued to explore and figure out how to do the store on a parallel track. And so we're in the process of figuring out how to do that, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to share our story, as it is to all of you. I had no idea when I walked in here that this was as I'm looking at this list, and it blows me away, the number of people that are part of all these human service activities, critical services in these two counties, and so I'm grateful for the opportunity to share. I suspect that all of you in some way or another will be able to help us figure out how to make this thing move forward, even if we are starting small, then we'll go.
Yeah,
So-
I would agree. When I asked you if we could present, I asked you probably last winter.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, by next fall, we'll
Yeah.
definitely have something to share that's exciting. And alas, here we are again. But yeah, it's still exciting nonetheless.
But
So.
there's 6,500 young people in our age group, in these two
Let's
counties.
get them fired up about this.
And we know from the VYCC, they hire 200 kids a year, and maybe a small handful maybe come from these two counties. And so we thought, well, what if even 1% of those kids could be involved in a Youth Conservation Corps program? That's a pretty sizable number, and it could really make an enormous difference. And our goal is
Yeah.
eventually, we'd like to see every young person involved at some point in this program, where they have the opportunity to instill and build a set of values that can really make all the difference in their lives, their families, where they work, their communities. And we know it works because there's 30 years of VYCC experience that shows us this. You know, parents telling us again and again, what did you do to my kid? You know, they're just different. They're actually bussing their own dishes after dinner to the sink. You know, this is personal responsibility. You know, they're picking up themselves. They're doing their own laundry. You know, it's the little things that happen every single day that you start building on those, and then it becomes a pattern that can impact on a much larger scale. And that's how the core model works, is that in these small crews, you learn about these values. You learn it because you're practicing them every hour, every day within that model. And you start to get that muscle memory relating to them. And then it's your family, and then it's probably where you go to school and then work. And, you know, like that song, Alice's Restaurant, you know, 2 and then 4 and then 8, and pretty soon you change the world, right? And that's really what our big picture is to, you know, to say, how can we create a stronger, better, you know, Franklin Grand-Isle, Vermont, and maybe eventually even the nation. So.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Has the thrift store model worked in any other communities? Like, have you tried it in any other communities?
We've only focused on St. Albans.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the first
Well,
one.
we started 2 years ago in Rutland, had a similar experience, and then we thought that was unique. And then we came to St. Albans, and we're looking, it may not be.
Would starting, I'm thinking of those that you're trying to get engaged with all this and everything. Maybe this is a bad idea, but would starting the store virtually be a way to go? I'm thinking in terms of, you don't need as much real estate for, you know, inventory purposes and that sort of thing. Again, I think you could start really small,
Yeah.
very cost effectively, and then maybe move from that. And depending on how that goes, then maybe you do have brick and mortar as well. So I'm just trying to think of a way you might be able to kickstart it off the ground.
Yeah.
And have all of these individuals focused in various aspects of that business.
Right, managing that, yeah.
But it's just through a different platform.
I don't think we've talked virtual, but it's a really interesting idea.
I'm just
Particularly
thinking-
with this new direction we're thinking.
Yeah, and especially, you know, number one, the individuals that you're targeting, which are 15 plus, and their understanding and ability of
Right,
technology and
that's where
everything.
they live.
And then if it's items that, you know, would appeal to that age group as well, that they start with, I think you might maybe have a way to get things started through that platform, and then,
Sure.
who knows, maybe it's a bad idea, but that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, Bridget, in seeing who's on the board,
Yeah.
you know, Stephanie is also in charge of Interact, which is a Rotary affiliated
Yeah.
organization, which
Yep.
I think 5 years ago was a student, now it's like,
Yeah,
I
she's
think
gotten a lot of
40
kids
or
excited about that.
what have you. I see some connections with maybe
Definitely.
Interact
Yeah.
and this
Yeah.
as a possibility as well.
Yep, yeah, she's brought that up and definitely
She
wants to
has,
get those
okay.
kids involved, yeah.
All right, yeah.
Mhm.
She's,
I agree.
I'm curious if you've reached out to Tim Smith from the Franklin Grand-Isle,
Yeah.
Industrial Development.
Yep, we've assembled this group, in addition to the leadership team, we've established this group that we've been calling strategic advisors. And there are other community leaders who can give some input on different things, and he's one of those people, and you've talked to him many times.
Okay.
He's excited about the project, thinks it can work, but
Yeah,
same thing, doesn't
probably
really know
would be.
where to put us. Yeah.
And be careful, because when you offer a good idea, we'll probably want you to be the strategic advisor.
Which they storing all the merchandise.
Well, I have been called a hoarder, so, you know, that may work, I don't know.
Yeah.
Looks like Ally has a question.
Yeah. Question?
Ali, you have a question or comment?
Yes, and sorry, the F-35 is passing by. You don't hear me very well. So thank you so much for the presentation, and I feel that the composition of the board, the breadth of expertise and experience that they bring is great, is amazing. And they are all women, right? You know, one thing that I have learned over the years as an educator is we usually do not work with the people that we serve. And was just wondering what it will take for the advisory group or for the board to actually have youth representation. Have you explored it? And I think it will be just amazing to hear their perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about adding youth members to the board. At this phase, because we're sort of just still in like launch mode, that's been difficult to do, and also we want them to have a meaningful experience on the board. Not that they wouldn't get that right now, but there's just not a lot to do at the moment. So we've talked about how once we get off the ground, because eventually this leadership team will turn into, you know, a more traditional board of directors or something like that, if you will, that will help determine like what projects these crews take on, will help determine how the money is spent. And at that point, we'd love to get youth involved in helping to make those decisions, because I think that would be really meaningful.
Thank you. And in on your website, you talked about 21 year long paid partnership. Like, and it wasn't very clear to me. You have to be 21, or you have to work 21 years in order to access the 28,000 stipend that you provided for the.
Oh, you could probably answer this better.
As a rule, it's 16 is the starting age for child labor laws. And then depending on the project, it's 18 because of that is, you know, I hope that just a different level of ability for kids to do different kinds of projects. But 16 is probably likely where we'll start.
You said you saw that somewhere on the website? Is that what you said, Ali?
Yes.
Okay.
I
Just wanna
think
make
the
sure.
wording maybe
Okay.
for people to read it and understand it.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that.
Wonderful. And again, you know, really thank you. And was just wondering if this is the only model around the state that has like youth at the center of what we do in trying to mitigate climate change in the state of Vermont. Is this the only model, or we have a
Well, there's the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps is a statewide program that uses the same model. There's a program called the Kingdom Corps, just east of here, and they have a youth corps model. And then there's a group called Smoky House down near Bennington, and they do something similar. But they're all relatively limited in scope. I mean, our hope is that to develop a model that literally any community could pick up and self-fund without public or philanthropic dollars.
Yeah.
And because if we can demonstrate that, then I think it will be an easy lift for foundations and others to provide the startup funds, knowing that that's just really one-time funding. So that is what our goal is. And we think that's how we get, you know, to the larger impact, if you will. Does that answer your question, Holly?
Yes, it answered my question. And the last question that I have is about the equity piece. You know, I feel like the website, when you read it, it's mostly climate strong, right? And what are the programming and, you know, projects, you know, centered around equity?
Sure. Are you looking at the, can I ask you which website you're looking at? Are you looking at CCC USA?
ccnbg.org.
Oh, you are, okay.
Yeah. You know, the first sentence is the issue of the day, including equity, climate, and politics. Yeah, but thank you so much. This is exciting.
Great, thank you.
I think we got a couple more hands up. Matthew, the floor.
Yes, thank you. My question is, and thank you, Ali, for bringing that up. On equity and there's equity and there's equality, two different wordings that tend to get intermixed, with each other. Yes, my question is, and this with Eric too as well, is how to change that plain language materials, because I'm working with the state of Vermont with, redoing their education material to make sure that it's plain language. Not everybody learns or do things the same way. And I'm wondering if, how would they make progress in making sure that plain language is, is more necessity now than ever. I'm going to use myself as an example. As a person with autism, myself, I can't understand college language because it's jargony words, which nobody seems to get unless you're in college. And that's what I see a big downturn in colleges, is because it's almost too complex. We shouldn't be making this complex. Is there a way to streamline it into a glossary, a summary, a one-pager, so what we're trying to present to the world or to individuals out there that may not have the means or needs to get that education material to better understand what our mission going forward? Thank you.
I'm not really sure how to answer that. We'd love, if you see our materials online, give us feedback on how those can be improved with, better or different language. We're really quite open to that. This is a work in progress. And so our goal is to get it right. Particularly, as we get out of the gate here in Franklin County and Grand-Isle. So we're it's those cases we may not know what we don't know. So, look at our stuff and give us the feedback, and almost certainly we'll incorporate it. This would you?
Yes,
I agree.
yeah, thank you very much for answering that question. It's just, language is key here. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Also have Megan Bridges. Have your hand.
Thank you. So much great stuff here. I just love, what you're trying to do, and I just want to point out, as you're seeking funding, you not only are helping youth with climate change issues, but also lean into the fact that I think there's a lot of studies showing that youth mental health is really affected by what's happening with the climate, and so this is a strategy to help youth with their mental health, and also it's a prevention strategy. So there's a couple of different avenues there when you reach out to foundations and organizations. So there's great stuff happening. Love the thrift store model. I volunteer at one on weekends. So yeah. Thanks for what you're doing.
I think you're spot on, and I think that's a big part of the power of that small team. It becomes a small, tight community that really depend on each other and work with each other. And again, this idea of personal responsibility, it's really interesting because it is a idea that when one really thinks about it, it gives a person the opportunity to really take control of so much of their lives, where these days so much can feel out of our control. I know that's true for me, and I know from good friends who are in that teach, and they're saying young people are either acting out like crazy in schools, or they're keeping it in and are enormously depressed. And I know that's true for my own children, who are in their early 20s, and one is very depressed about the future, others are holding it in, and so when you build these, they're really the goal is very diverse, small teams, and when we say trained leaders, what we're talking about is leaders who, they're not experts with a hammer and nail. They're really good at facilitating group discussions and all those interactions that go along when you get, a small group of people together that are very different from each other, and learning about each other, learning to trust each other, being able to share these things that are in our heads that we don't necessarily know how to talk about or share, and building that trust. It becomes a great touchstone or platform for when they then leave the program and go out back into their own families or back to school or whatever. It gives them an opportunity to just feel more in control, and the tools to be able to interact more successfully. So that's my long-winded way, Megan, of agreeing with you. It's really, probably more than ever, that's an important outcome, and we don't talk about it as much as maybe we should.
Yeah, and right in that room with you is Crystal Lampman, who's got the Amazing Teen Institute program, which is a similar model of bringing a small group of teens together and to become leaders and take that out into the world. So she's great, great person for you to chat with if you haven't already.
Thanks, Megan.
I haven't, but I actually wrote her name down during the introductions. And I put a little check mark there, so I had someone to talk to.
I have one more thought along with the virtual space is the concept of like a mobile thrift boutique. And I like a trailer.
Just restate, thrift boutique.
Thrift boutique
Yeah,
that
it's a
can
good
go
phrase.
out into rural communities where there is actual need, where there's lack of transportation, kids that need something to do. Yeah.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah, that's.
Joe, you had.
Well, I wanted to, that's a great adjunct to that conversation earlier,
Yeah.
Devin. Good idea. I just wanted to mention, Megan, thank you for bringing up the mental health of youth, because certainly we've always been bombarded with messages every day, throughout our lives. But there has been nothing that can equal what's happening today. The amount of messages between all of the devices and everything else that young people are exposed to, certainly depression, anxiety, the hopelessness factor, which I think Thomas brought up. When you can get young people engaged in certain activities where they can begin to work together as a team and flourish and see possibilities versus seeing hopelessness, I think that's really important. And I think what you're embarking on is really terrific, and hopefully another avenue to help youth, to kind of uncover all the qualities that they possess that maybe they're not yet doing because they feel just overwhelmed with everything that's going on.
I think
So,
there's something to be said for like getting out in the natural world is a great place
Yes.
for
Yeah.
recentering yourself and kind of stripping away all of the other pressures and things like that. So.
Yep. And Thomas, you're right. People don't talk about mental health enough. We always kid here that people talk about medical situations and all that all day long. But the minute you start talking about mental health, people dive under the table and they go, that doesn't happen here. Well, we all know it does happen here. And nobody should be ashamed of it. If somebody's depressed, the last thing you want them doing is keeping it in and year out and getting more and more and more depressed. And the same thing goes for anxiety or any other disorder as well. Seeking treatment quicker is a goal that we have as an organization because it just helps people to live a better life.
Yeah.
And it's so closely aligned with your physical health. So anyway, any other questions for Thomas and Bridget? Thomas?
I would love to ask you to send the little pamphlet out that I shared around the table here today. I can get you an electronic copy.
If you get me the electronic,
if you want to send it to the rest of the group.
Yes, we'll put that in our weekly updates,
Okay.
and everybody will the larger group will have access to it.
And then I would just encourage people to reach out to Bridget or myself. We would love to entertain more conversations, gather more ideas, more input. We I do want to reiterate that we'd love to come back and report in again down the road to tell you where we're at. I think this partnership could be absolutely instrumental to help pulling this off. And of course, as we pull it off here, then we hope we can go to Rutland and White River and Bennington, and from there have an impact even well beyond Vermont. But it needs to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And so we really welcome all your support, thoughts, ideas, and please don't be shy. As I'm gathering no one is here.
Well, maybe Eric.
Well, since you opened that door by invoking my name, I'm failing in my role as Melinda White, because we're Melinda White here, was here in the beginning of the meeting. She would have reminded people, if you are online and it is your first meeting, please drop your email in the chat so we can record that.
Very good. Very well said.
I have to go.
Any other questions? I think.
Question, an announcement.
Yes.
Just-
Okay. Well, I do want to thank Thomas and
Yes.
Bridget for a great presentation this morning. And Bridget does have to
Yes,
depart.
I have to depart, but
And
thank you all.
we understand that, and thank you, Bridget.
I think I'll scoot out.
Okay.
Since you have
Okay.
other business, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you, Thomas.
you all.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. And don't forget to send that digital version, and we'll make sure it goes to
I
everybody.
would definitely will.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
already, thank you. Okay, so we now move into the
House, sign
announcement
that
section.
sheet.
And actually a very timely announcement, considering we were just talking about youth mental health, or mental health in general.
Yeah.
We are holding our annual meeting for Caring Communities on November 30th at 6 p.m. at Holy Trinity Parish Hall in Swanton. We started the conversation last year about the needs of youth coming out of the pandemic. And one of the things that we're going to continue that conversation with this year is around mental health needs of young people. We took a look at the 2021 Youth Risk Behavior Survey. We found that in the state of Vermont, over 80% of high school students have experienced a mental health issue within the last 30 days. And that's the 30 days of taking that survey. So we would like to continue that conversation at our annual meeting this year, so everyone is invited. We would love to see representation from a broad spectrum of folks.
That is terrific. And you're so right, Crystal. As we were talking earlier, I mean, when we say it's not happening here, the reality is it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody should be ashamed by it. If somebody, who either on the Zoom or in the room has not had a day where they were depressed? I mean, where you feel, for whatever reasons, and maybe that lasts them more than a day or so, but my point is that it's something that everybody can experience from time to time. The thing you don't want to happen is that it becomes a daily occurrence,
Yeah.
and then a weekly, and then a monthly, and you can't get out of that zone. But it is something that I believe everybody from time to time has experienced, but just in small doses. So we don't want it to become overwhelming to people over time, and what you need to do is talk about it. And things like mental health first aid, where people learn about early warning signs so they can help those that are the closest to them in their lives, and they can hopefully help them to seek treatment sooner. Maybe it's even just to buy a book about mental health and trauma. So anyway, but thank you, Crystal. Anyone else have any announcements or initiatives or events that are coming up that you'd like to express?
On that note that you said, I'll just promote this book. I have not read it yet, but this podcast has been amazing. It's called The Myth of Normal, and it's by Gabor Mate, and it's about healing trauma, illness and healing in a toxic culture. So I just think it correlates to what you said, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Devin. Anyone else have anything that you'd like to share as far as upcoming events or?
Possibly things in the chat.
Nope.
More comments in the chat currently.
Let's see, one is just an email address. The other one, Amy Brewer. Amy, do you want to speak, or do you just want me to read your comment out?
I think she's.
No, I'll come off mute. When we talk about mental health, I've been blessed with great mental health, but it isn't always great. At some points, I need help, and I have really used my EAP through work just to connect with the counselor and to use those tools, and I find it normal and helpful, and I like sharing that story because everybody should feel comfortable using resources and counseling when they're looking for new tools or looking to maintain good mental health or to really help them through a challenging time. And I like to share that story because there's nothing to be ashamed of. So yeah, normal. It's normal.
Yep, you're so right, Amy.
And I
So
see
right.
Matt LaFleur has his hand up. Do you have something else to add, Matt?
Yes, this is Matthew. I'm moving forward with the discussion that we had today. I'm so confused, I'm gonna be honest. Because my mind is not made for this, clearly. It just, I think things differently. What I see here is, us moving forward. I'm gonna try to make it plainly as simple as I can, simplify it as much as I can. Is try to understand more broader, scope of what our work here is doing across the counties. Because, with me, college education is not for me. It's to the point that you say that to a senior citizen, they don't want to be involved. It's just too much. It's like that overstimulating their access needs of learning. I know we got Eric right here with, help me best understand what can we do move forward with not just the communities that we serve, but the, projects, materials, tools, education materials. Help me understand the best way of using a plain language model that I'm doing across it. The Vermont Department of Health, it's complexity, to the point that nobody understands this or gets it because we're going way too far. Is what should we do more of to bring that inclusivity to the broad, normalcy of what should be normal? Thank you.
Matthew, I think it's one of those situations where it's almost like each and every organization has to take a look at what are the best ways to look at materials that they provide, and in many instances, maybe have a more, what's the word I'm looking for, direct, to the point, not, as you say, as complex. I know that we face this here in many instances with individuals that we serve that have intellectual and developmental disabilities, is that the way that they see the world is far different than some other people, and we need to take some of the materials that we produce that are directed to them and have them so that, as you say, they themselves can easily understand what a program or a service is all about. So I think what I'm saying is it's almost as if we have to take it down to the individual organization level and have the organizations themselves just take a look at what are the ways that they can achieve that goal.
And I think one of the most helpful things as an organization leader, Matthew, is that you continue to advocate.
Yeah.
So, I've seen you at many months of meetings at this point, and you're doing exactly what we need you to do, and that's advocating for folks and reminding us when we need to make those changes. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Megan.
I would love to learn more about potential trainings for organizations that could be offered. Common Good Vermont offers trainings to nonprofits. Who's the best resource to offer a training? And Matthew, you probably can make a recommendation. Love to know that.
This is Matthew LaFleur. My recommendation would be, for the, to this is good website. I'm in so many, like you said, All Brains Belong to Vermont, which is actually I'm a member of, which, you know, is by a practitioner that's actually autistic herself. And what she taught me was to, just make this short, was learning and understanding the individual access needs, but also the mind of that person. Because she has a lot to give out there. And when she's doing it across the state of Vermont, I can't compete at this point. I mean, she's doing what I would dream to be doing. Because she's, you know, she's just something that, you know, that speaks to her heart, but speaks to the truth, you know, what we're doing here. And moving forward, I think, you know, that's, you know, one of the organizations that we're training and that's just within the health department. I mean, but she can also give you other things, which is free. You can attend Zoom training webinars at all branches of Vermont for free. We don't charge anything, so it's just, you know, trying to make sure that, you know, connect. Community involvement is what we need and what we want from individuals across the state of Vermont. And we need your help. We need your help to make our dream a reality, to make sure that individual access to the other person is met, meritly. And that's what I want to see move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Dr. Hauser is amazing. I've had the privilege to sit in on neurodiversity training she gives. So thank you. I'm going to connect with her.
I see Ali has dropped some information and resources in the chat. Do you want to talk about that briefly, Ali?
Yes, thank you. So Building Bright Futures received $23 million grant from the federal government around Bird to 5. And of those $23 million, BPF will be providing $2 million a year to programs and services across the state through the Vermont Early Childhood Fund grant. So the information session about these grants will be taking place today at 1 o'clock, and I don't know why the links are not working for people to register and attend. Already over 140 people registered to attend. So BBF used to only give $100,000 a year for 7 organizations, but now we extended it substantially with these $2 million a year. So this is a great opportunity for great programs and projects across the state. And we encourage people from Franklin Grand-Isle to apply, and I know already some of them will be applying. And also we did receive a transportation grant of the Vermont Early Childhood Fund last year, and just bridges, I believe, from CBO was managed, and it was a great hit, right? So if you have program or projects, this is for you, and please show up, listen, and submit an application. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Is there anything else in the chat?
I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. Anybody else have any questions, comments, or any other announcements? All right.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, the sound of silence, we will end this month's meeting. We will reconvene on November the 1st. At 8:30 again with the networking, meeting itself at 9. Once again, I want to thank everybody for your time this morning. You've got 7 or 8 minutes of found time, which never hurts. Amy Brewer have the time to go outside and have a smoke.
Vape.
Oh, vape, no. Oh, no.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, she's transitioned to vaping because it's not as invasive, so.
I have missed you all so much. I've missed this meeting for the past, 4 months, and the longest time I've gone without being ridiculed by you, Joe. So it was a sad moment for me. I'm happy to be back.
Well, it's great to have you, and it's great to have everybody here. And again, we'll reconvene on November the 1st. Have a great month. Continue to do the great work that you do for our communities. Thanks again, everybody.
It's great to see you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.